when juries have questions as they go through their debates and deliberations, they always want to go back to those jury instructions. They're critically important. That's how the judge lets the jury know what they're supposed to do and what the law is for the case that they are considering. And this is, in this case, it unfortunately has become another mechanism for Judge Merchan to put his thumb on the scale. Actually, he's really putting his full body weight on the scale at this point in favor of the prosecution and against Donald Trump, because what he has done with jury instructions here is really pretty incredible. For instance, he has declined the requests of the defense in order to properly instruct the jury on the law. And the reason he gave is because it's too confusing. He didn't want to give jury instructions that were too confusing. Never mind the fact that it really is the prosecution's case that is too confusing. And it's too confusing, of course, because it has no basis in law or fact. But he's refused to properly instruct the jury on that. He's refused to properly instruct the jury by all appearances. It's also pretty remarkable that he hasn't published what his exact jury instructions are as well. That's also problematic. But he also apparently hasn't instructed them on the correct intent that the prosecution had to show, which, because they're alleging a violation of federal election campaign law, the burden of the prosecution is to show that the defendant willfully violated the law. That means the defendant knew what the law was and purposely decided to violate that law. Now, it's no surprise why Judge Merchan was refusing to give that instruction as well. And perhaps one of the most egregious examples of a bad jury instruction that I've ever seen in my life, that just goes to the heart of American jurisprudence, is the requirement for unanimity, that all jurors have to agree unanimously in order to convict someone. And he has suggested, and the prosecution suggested this as well in their closing yesterday, that they do not have to agree what a secondary crime would be in order to convict Donald Trump of a felony. 3 people can decide it's a campaign finance violation. 4 people can decide it's a tax violation, and everybody else, can, I guess, decide it's reckless driving or something. Completely off the wall and ridiculous here. So that is, we've seen some real abuses from the bench throughout this trial. This probably takes the cake.
Wow. Okay, so I just want to make sure I get this right, because this is everything, I think. If a judge gives a proper jury instruction, then it would be, this is the law, and the question is X. Then they go deliberate, and if the juries are like going and like, well, I don't like them, then someone gets like, no. The question isn't, do you like him? The question is, did he willingly do X? And can they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this thing? And keep bringing it back to the question. But they didn't do that. So what would what would an example of a proper jury instruction be in this case, if you were the judge trying to do a fair-handed job?
Well, if I think there was any fair-minded judge, there wouldn't be jury instructions, because this case would have been dismissed as soon as the prosecution brought it. It's a case that had absolutely no legal basis. So first of all, there should have never been a case here. But if a fair judge had happened to find his way in Juan Merchan's seat somewhere during the trial, and there was jury instructions, one of the things they should have put out there is, do you believe, or did the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump violated federal campaign finance law by falsifying a business record, and did so knowing of his legal duty and purposely violating that legal duty? Now, if you have a jury instruction like that, then of course the jurors have to say not guilty, because there's zero evidence of that. There's absolutely zero evidence that President Trump purposely was violating the law here, and so I think Judge Merchan knows that. He knows that the prosecution has tried a sloppy case, and he's going to do everything he can to be the effective prosecutor that gets this thing over the hurdle to a guilty verdict, because he so badly wants that. Because for him, this case isn't about justice. This case has nothing to do about justice. This case is about persecuting a political opponent, and quite frankly, it's pretty clearly about doing what's right by his daughter's business. At least we have to really take that into account and wonder if that's the reason he's making the rulings that he is because his daughter has a pecuniary interest, a financial interest in this case.
Of course. It's talking with Jesse Binnall, one of Trump's lawyers. It's interesting to me that a judge even has that much discretion at all when it comes to what a jury instruction should be. I feel like that should just be read from a piece of paper. If this is the law that he's being charged with, here's the jury instruction that you read to the jury, and then But
so that's the thing, is that is usually what most judges do, is they always try to stick to the standard jury instructions for a particular jurisdiction. But there is no standard jury instructions for these offenses because they've never charged these offenses before. Donald Trump had to come along, and they had to dive down into the history books in their Stalinist effort of show me the man and I'll show you the crime, to try to come up with some way to go after him and prosecute him. And so that's why there's no standard jury instructions here, and that's why he's had to make them up from whole cloth.
Okay. In New York, so I thought the media made a mistake about this, but I guess not. The defense goes first in their closing arguments, and then the prosecution wraps it up? That seems backwards.
Yeah, it is. And there are some places, and I actually don't know for sure if this is the way it works in New York or not. I do know, of course, that Trump's team went first yesterday, did an absolutely outstanding job. Todd Blanche gave a pitch-perfect closing, and then you had this Mirandering closing by the prosecution afterwards that lasted for hours and hours. But usually what you have is that the prosecution goes twice because it's their burden. So they will go first, and the defense gets up there and is able to give a response to that, and then the prosecution gets a rebuttal. Some prosecutors will be clever, and they will, like in Virginia, for instance, there will be prosecutors that will waive their opening closing argument and just give the rebuttal part, which is effectively what happened yesterday. Regardless, it's very, very difficult for the defense to respond to the prosecution's argument, especially since the prosecution is one that has the burden, when you haven't even heard exactly what their theory of the case was at all during this process. So it's a very backward system.
Wow. Am I way off? Like, do most states have the defense give the final word?
No, I don't know of any state that has the defense give the final word. It usually is.
Oh, wow. I was totally off. I was totally wrong. Oh, wow. I had no idea. Okay, totally blew that one.
Yeah.
We talked to Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, a moment ago. And she said that they have to stay in the courtroom during the jury deliberations. They can't go anywhere. What? Is that a normal thing?
No, that part's not really normal. Normally what you have is the judge will say, I want everybody staying in such a place that you can be back here within 1 hour or 1 hour and a half if there's something from the jury. For instance, if my trials, I've stayed at hotel rooms that are right across the street from the courthouse for just that reason, so that deliberations, you can get back in there if you need to.
Well, remember the end of the OJ trial, at least in the movie, they were like going on vacation. They were like, we're out of here. And then before they could even leave, they were like, we have the jury's done. So I just assumed they could go somewhere. So why are they keeping him in the courtroom?
Well, I mean, I think we all know the entire reason that Judge Merchan has scheduled this case for when he scheduled it for, and why he has been very, very deliberate in keeping Donald Trump in the courtroom and now making it so he can't even, leave the courthouse area, is because he wants to keep Donald Trump off the campaign trail. He knows that the process is the punishment, that even if the jury comes back with a not guilty verdict or the jury comes back hung, he's still got his pound of flesh in this because he's been able to keep Donald Trump from going out and campaigning, while his chosen candidate, Joe Biden, has been not only free to go around the country campaigning, but using this case in order to attack Donald Trump. It was just one of the biggest travesties of justice I think we've ever seen in our criminal justice system.
I think this is the quote that you were referencing earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is one of the prosecutors. Any single one of the unlawful means is enough to conclude that the Trump Tower conspiracy, they gave it a title, violated New York state election law. You don't have to agree on which unlawful means were involved. Is that what you were referencing?
Yeah, that's right.
Earlier?
That's exactly right. And that is a misstatement of the law, and it's such a huge misstatement of the law that it really just goes to the heart of our criminal justice system and the requirement for unanimity. It's something that encourages overcharging. So, for instance, it's like a prosecutor going in and saying, well, I'm going to charge you with kidnapping, murder, and assault. And jury, I think you're going to find you may not agree on which of those three that he's done, but you can probably agree he's done at least one of those. So that is why you would never want to have a judge issue an instruction like that, and why it's patently wrong on the law. And it's something that is, I think, almost a surefire way that he's going to get reversed. But Judge Merchan doesn't care if he's going to get reversed.
No, the reverse doesn't matter. Yeah. That's after the election.
After the election, he only cares about the election.
So I'm maybe got time for two more quick questions. I'm fascinated. Every legal analyst I've heard, they're like, when is the jury going to be done? And every single person has said they'll probably wrap it up by the weekend. And they're like, oh, why? And they say, well, no one really wants to come back on Monday. And I just think that's so bizarre that it's like the biggest case ever, or maybe put the former president and potentially future president in jail. And everyone's like, I just want to wrap this up. Sure, whatever, guilty. Like, what does that say about juries and human nature that people are just like, okay, just whatever.
Yeah,
it's Friday.
Yeah, that's right. I want to get back to my life, and that's something that oftentimes holds true. We don't know if that's going to happen in this case or not. The only thing that I've generally found to be true in my experience is juries come back after lunch. They always want that last free lunch together. Especially since they've spent weeks together. So if I make any prediction, I will never predict how many days it will take for them to come back, but I will predict it comes back after lunch.
Hilarious. Let's say he is guilty. Do they immediately put him in jail?
That's up to Judge Merchan. They shouldn't.
Is it?
And remember, this is the prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, that wants to let violent criminals walk the streets of New York without putting them in jail. And so, this allegation of a bookkeeping error, he's going to try to put somebody in jail. Well, again, it would be for political purposes. But I think they're going to try to. Yes, I believe they're going to do everything they can to try to, because by putting him in jail, it keeps him off the campaign trail, and they know Joe Biden needs every assist possible in order for him to win the election. So I think Judge Merchan would love nothing more than to put him in jail immediately.